Welcome back to Pinstripe Pulse. It's the first episode of the new year. Jake's in London, I'm in Queens, and the Yankees left field situation is still in limbo. We have a little bit more to talk about, and let's hit it.
Let's get into it.
Welcome back to Pinstripe Pulse. My name is Liam. I'm joined once again by Jake. Jake, how's it going, man?
Doing good, man. How about you?
Doing great. Can you tell us about your European escapades?
Well, so I lost my hair in the process. No, I cut it all off. I figured it was time to let my ears get a little bit colder this winter because the hot stuff is definitely simmered down. But no, I bounced around Europe for the last 4 weeks at this point. I started off for a week in Barcelona, didn't have the best internet connection. Was in Bruges, Brussels, Bruges, then Brussels, and then back to Bruges in Belgium for about 8 days. That was during Christmas. Really fun little medieval city. Small town. I recommend checking it out if you haven't. Ate my weight in Belgian waffles. Those were excellent. Um, and then from there, I was in Paris for about 2 days for New Year's Eve, and then now I'm currently in London, and then I get back to New York City in about 3 or 4 days. So in the home stretch.
Have you been to all those places before?
No, not at all. And my bank account is definitely feeling it because I don't know if you've ever been to London, but the markets here are insane. Like the vintage shopping is out of this world. And I'm right in Camden, so they've got one of the biggest underground markets for like clothing and like food in general. So I've definitely been splurging of late, and I need to stop that.
Yeah, those trips, even in Barcelona when I went for only a few days, my bank account was absolutely crushed afterwards. But you want to go and experience everything, but everywhere costs
Yeah.
money.
Yeah, I feel like with Barcelona especially, it's just like it's pretty cheap in terms of like food and stuff like that. So you can kind of get by, but I don't know. There's something about London that just entices you, you know, just like sucks you in.
So how you been keeping up with all the Yankees fodder over there
Ugh.
on Twitter pretty much the whole time, scrolling every day?
Yeah, essentially is, and that's like my least favorite way of doing it, honestly, just because it's a lot of people having meltdowns 24/7. And in my case, I'll be waking up at like 2 or 3 a.m. and it's like, did you hear that Aaron Hicks is going to be the starting left fielder for the Yankees? I'm like, I don't need to be thinking about this when I'm dreaming. Like this doesn't need to be the thing that I'm waking up to and falling asleep to. So I'm ready for us to get like back, or for me at least to get back on a regular schedule where I can wake up at a reasonable time, have like a mini meltdown, then go back to sleep, and like hopefully, wake up to some good news regarding especially left field.
Yeah, I tried when I went to Ireland over the summer to keep up with it. I went to Ireland the first 2 weeks of August, which was like
Yeah.
the worst time for the Yankees this whole year. And Jake, you would still text me, and I'm like, I can't watch because Yes Network doesn't allow me to. So a few days I tried to follow through Twitter, and it was just the end of the world on Twitter. I had to shut it off. I even tried to listen to some of the talk radio, like going to sleep, because like the afternoon drive would like line up with the bedtime roughly, and I couldn't do it. Like it
Yeah.
was, it was so much if you're not watching the games. But glad you're back on the
Yeah.
mic, and we'll see you back in the US soon, right? In a few days you're back.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is literally my first time being on the mic actually. So really happy about that. I got this little bad boy down in Belgium. So $50, $60, nice investment. Oh, I'm sorry, that's an absolute lie.
You
This was
sound crisp.
$100. What am I saying? I was thinking I got headphones as well, and they're like sound canceling and all that. And I was like, I think I'm not bold enough to try those out just yet. But yeah, this
Yeah.
is definitely worth the investment. It's a little handheld guy, so happy about that.
Looks good. You sound crisp, so it's good. So going on to you alluded to it a little bit before, but since you were last on, I know we talked in depth about the Yankees left field situation. There were a few options on the market. And now really all the free agents are gone. So in terms of Yankees options, there's a few that were floating around. Most of them are on the team. Obviously, we have Aaron Hicks, Oswaldo Cabrera, who was in there a bunch last year. We signed Rafael Ortega on a minor league deal yesterday, who last played for the Cubs. So that's an interesting one that I have some thoughts on. Otherwise, Jake had floated
Yeah.
Dalton Varsho as an option, and we know that he's now on the Toronto Blue Jays. What do you feel about that move for the Blue Jays?
So I know you're personally a little bit lower on Varsho than I am. The more I looked into Varsho, I just see a very versatile player, super dynamic. The fact that he's able to go back and catch and be a good catcher, that's very impressive to me. I have a bias towards catchers in the first place, but his defensive metrics were outstanding last year. I know that his batting average was a little low, but like this is a dude who is pretty young. He's got a lot of team control at this point. I could see him putting up some really good numbers for the Blue Jays, especially like in the AL East. I could see him being a menace for us. So, but the thing is that return would have been kind of crazy because Gabriel Moreno was the Blue Jays top. That's their number one draft pick, and Gurriel was absolutely a dynamic, just well known, player who established himself with the Blue Jays for quite a few years. So that would have hurt for us because that's probably looking at like a Volpe or a Dominguez or Peraza, and then also like a Glaber on top of that. So I'm completely fine personally with holding back on that specific trade. I would prefer to allocate one, top prospect and some maybe top tens over to the Pittsburgh Pirates for Brian Reynolds instead, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, I was lower on Varsho than you. I think after you brought that up, and we heard it also on other places. If you listen to the Just Baseball show, I know that Peter Apple spoke about it a little bit. I actually watched a video a few days ago of Trevor May, who he's been a reliever bouncing around. I think he's going to be with the A's next year, but he was on the Mets the past few years.
Yeah.
He does a bunch of YouTube videos, and he gave out his like awards for the season, and he like the most underrated player he gave to Dalton Varsho, which I thought was really interesting because I think, obviously looking at it from the pro perspective often gives you the insight of what players really look like, because they're gonna deep dive less into performance stats and more into seeing them day to day, their projected stats, just what their talent looks like. So I think it's potentially a good deal for the Blue Jays. I'm shocked they gave up Gabby Moreno. I play out of the park baseball, and on one of my more recent, more successful sims, I was fired from the Yankees after about 4 seasons because I spent too much money. Uh, and then after I got fired, I was hired by the Blue Jays 2 years later, and I took control of their core, which included Vladdy, Bo Bichette, Gabby Moreno, and Gabby Moreno. From 2025, I controlled the sim as a consistent starter. Obviously, this is literally fantasy land, but he became a Hall of Fame catcher in my sim. So in my head, he's a Hall of Fame potential. But we know how prospects are.
It's Pudge Rodriguez. Yeah.
Exactly. He was better. Gabby Moreno in my sim hit 400 home runs as a catcher. Like he was good. He was really, really good. We won like 5 World Series. It was crazy. Um,
Yeah, I mean, it would be really fun to see him and Adley Rushman going at it for like the best catcher in the AL East for a long time. That would be such a cool little competition. But it sounds like you kind of turned into like a hybrid of Dombrowski mixed with like Preller.
yeah. And honestly, I love this move in a by similar token for the D-backs because they have a lot of guys uh coming up. I always blank on the name. They have Corbin Carroll, that's the one with them,
Corbin
right?
Carroll is looking really good. He's their center fielder, I think, at this point. He established himself really well last year. I did not realize how good his numbers were, but I checked his baseball reference out. I want to say like 3 days ago, and he was sneaky, like 800 plus OPS guy, 20 homers, first full season. So like you've got him, you've got Jake McCarthy, who was another guy that the Yankees kind of looked into. I'm sure lefty bat. He's probably going to play one of the corners. I think he had like a 780 OPS last season. They've got a good team that they're kind of brewing up there. They could be a sneaky like third place, fourth place finish. Like there's a good chance that they like slide into like maybe within the fold of having that second wild card.
Yeah, I could see it. I could see them getting third. I think they could be as good as the Giants. I mean, the Giants kind of just whiffed on their top level talent. They definitely should be better than the Rockies. And
Yeah.
looking at them, Dalton Varsho is young and controllable, and you know, can develop into a pretty good player. But I think Dalton Varshaw's added value is some of the versatility that he gives. So for a win now
Hmm.
team, he fits in with the Blue Jays, where I heard about this conversation because the Blue Jays also gave up Lourdes Gurriel. Um, and you know maybe their batting numbers go down, but their team WAR increases because Varsho gives solid defense in the outfield and at catching. He can run the bases. So for a win now team with his flexibility, Varsho's a really good piece for the Blue Jays. Whereas for the
Yeah.
D-backs, they're looking at the Padres and the Dodgers. They're not going to win a division within the next 3 years. So I think to
Hmm.
look at a long-term investment of plus hitting catcher that can develop into something really solid defensively, work with your young pitchers, and that way, if you develop that rapport, it can help his development behind the plate. I think it's a great deal for the D-backs. It's solid for the Blue Jays. I think I wouldn't have wanted to give up as much as they did, but they're going for it. I respect it.
Yeah, I mean, like in the grand scheme of things, they only did give up. I mean, it's a lot because of where Moreno was ranked, but it's two players, so it's not like they completely gutted the farm necessarily. They gave up their best prospect, but at the same time, there's always a chance that he does fizzle out. I doubt that happens with Moreno, but I think it's worth the reward that you're getting with a guy, like you said, as versatile as Varsho. And I see Varsho, like, if you're looking to compare him, someone that's already on the Blue Jays, that trade reminds me a lot of what they did with Matt Chapman, too. Just bringing in a guy that's going to give you a really premier glove, and you can get some pretty nice upside when it comes to the ceiling of the bat.
So transitioning away from Varsho, since that's not a Yankees option anymore, who do you
Yeah.
think could be viable options, whether that's internal or external for them?
So I know that there's like reports coming out that some like insider told Krishner of like one of the Yankee beat reporters that there's a chance that Hicks and Oswaldo Cabrera, excuse me, will have a chance to battle it out. Like that's a possibility. I emphasize possibility because I still don't believe that's the move that they're going to stick to. Um, Cashman is yet to really make his mark on this offseason. And it's clear as day that the last move that they really need to round out this thing because they haven't upgraded anything offensively yet. They've just retained Judge. They've brought in a bunch of left field minor league options at this point. Rafael Ortiga is someone that you mentioned who is very intriguing. And we'll get into that, I'm sure, in a second. I'll let you take full control of that one. He does have some really nice peripherals and really nice numbers looking into it. But I still think that they're building up their minor league depth as every team does leading into a season because they don't trust Hicks to be a guy. I mean, this is the same team that put him in out for 14 days last season because he wasn't able to hold his own in the outfield, which is the thing that he's paid to do. Um, it was clear that he was having a very tough time out there, and that kind of carried over at the plate as well. I just don't see the fans getting behind that move, and I don't see that panning out long term. I think that they are still having their eyes set on Brian Reynolds as their number one target. And there's a lot of quiet, like nothing's happening right now in the Yankees world in terms of like trades being made, but they are bringing in a lot of personnel that we will also get into in the front office that will make those moves a lot more navigatable, if you want to put it that way. But it's tough. I really think that they have the prospect capital to obtain someone of Reynolds' caliber. But if you're looking into backup plans that are below him in stock, it's likely probably a Max Kepler because he does align with what they need is a high contact, good bat to ball guy, lefty bat who's capable of playing a decent enough left field. And then you've got prospects that are going to be coming in the next couple of years. So think of that as a stopgap. The same way I think of Jurickson Profile as another stopgap. He's probably the only outfielder on the free agent market right now that even assembles someone that the Yankees would go for as a free agent signing at this point.
Yeah, I think Profar is a pretty solid option for them just in terms of what's out there. I mean, Profar has been a top level professional for the past few years. And top level, I mean, someone who's consistently going to be in the lineup, who in a winning team can hit, 6 to 8, um, and go out there. My one hesitancy with him, I don't think he grades out great defensively in left field. Not
Yep.
terribly. Well, actually, I think it is pretty bad, right?
Yeah, it's
I
not
think I
great.
should. It's not great. Yeah.
He's
So
below
that
average.
concerns me. Yeah. So that concerns me about a Yankee Stadium left field. And though he can give versatility, I really don't think that's what we're looking for right now. I think this team has enough versatility for
Yeah.
a left fielder. Like we have Oswaldo Cabrera, that's a versatile option, you know? And I think my concern is that I
Yeah,
don't
might as well keep the younger version of that.
exactly. So my concern is that I think I want left field to be locked up. So looking at Jurickson Profar, I know the past 2 seasons, I think he's gone over 100 games in left field each of those years, but I think that's kind of just he's fitting in that one hole that the Padres had. Um, so yeah, and then in terms of Brian Reynolds, the longer it goes, the more pessimistic I get about a Reynolds trade because my understanding is that the Pirates are asking for a lot, and I'm thinking twice the return that the Blue Jays got for Varsho. So in my head, what this and obviously this is all projecting. This is based off of some rumors, but there's no names and stuff. But in my head, what the Blue Jays, what the Pirates would be asking for Reynolds is in the family of Peraza, Glaber, Volpe, and or Dominguez, and then probably Trey Sweeney. I know the Pirates wanted arms. Maybe that's Luis Heel and David Garcia. That could be Mike King. Like I think it's that level. I think at least four, maybe five would have to go of guys who are like could play on the pro team next year of our top level prospects, which is a lot for a guy who we haven't seen play left field, who hasn't he's been really good. Like baseball is
Yeah.
baseball. You have to play your at bats, but he hasn't played on a competitive team in a long time. Can he handle New York? Like how much of that are we willing to part ways with?
Yeah. So I mean, I fully agree with you there. It's really just an interesting situation with him though, because he is a Vanderbilt guy. You know, he kind of was bred to play under pressure. And when we did see him, we were at that game where Judge hit his 60th home run against the Pirates. And in that series, he absolutely tore it up. So there is a possibility too that he like just fully embraces that pressure. He's never had protection in front of him or behind him in a lineup. So that's another thing. This dude still managed to be 27% better than the average hitter in the MLB every year, like throughout his career, despite being in a pretty shitty lineup, if we're looking at the grand scheme of things. That being said, I do agree that it's going to be a complex package if you are going to like make this deal happen. You're going to have to get creative with it. That might require doing something like a 3-team trade with a team that does have the prospect capital in terms of pitching prospects, or like a Miami Marlins team that has already well-established pitchers in their system. They have a full surplus at this point. So if you can pull that off with them, send over like maybe an Everson Pereira. Um, who else do we've got? I think Andre Chaparro is another guy who's in the prospect pipeline, but isn't quite a top 5, top 10 prospect. If you can just stock load with those guys, Will Warren, maybe throwing a Luis Hill. Luis Hill, I think, is like the perfect candidate for a trade at this point. Give him a Davy. Like I would stock load as many pitchers as you can give them and just like blow them away with quantity over quality. Even though these guys are like there are some quality arms in there, I think that's the best way you can go about it if you're solely looking to make it a two-team trade is by just stock loading like 7 to 10 prospects straight up. And I think that it is something that is possible. You know, I think that they could, if they really wanted to put their mind to it, it could happen.
I have a few questions for you.
Yeah.
First, before the Brian Reynolds trade, are the Yankees better than the Astros right now? That's constructed.
Pitching, the pitching is on par. I'd say they are just as good, if not better. Hitting, no. They need to still be able to produce at the plate in the postseason. And this lineup is exactly the same. That's why I'm inclined to believe that they are not done making moves at this point. And they're pretty well aware of this.
Do you think Brian Reynolds is that difference? Do you think Brian Reynolds in the Yankees lineup would make the Yankees lineup better than Houston?
I think it makes them at least equal at this point. I would prefer to see 2 different moves being made. I don't know what those moves would be. One thing that we need to take into account is we're getting a full season of Bader. We don't know what that's going to look like. We're getting a full season. Likely, I'm excited for this as long as he doesn't get traded. Peraza at shortstop. I think that's going to change a lot. So he couldn't break out the same way that Pena did for the Astros last season. So it could be like a little bit closer than we're projecting at this point, but I think that Reynolds does move the needle significantly in terms of giving that, you know, he is just a versatile switch hitting batter who can do it from both sides of the plate, who you can slot at the 1 or 2. I'd say he's probably ideal if you have a healthy DJ LeMahieu, slot him at 1. You have Reynolds at 2, Judge at 3, Rizzo or Stanton at 4 or 5. That way you can split up the lefties and righties well. And he's also like he had a down season last year. He batted 265, 266, had an 800 OPS. Like I'll take that any day if that's your down season.
I agree with both of your answers, and I'm going to give a bit of a scared fan take in which what I think the Yankees might be thinking. I project that you're thinking based off of Reynolds makes them as good, so do it because then you have a good chance. Then it's a coin flip, then you go into a playoff series and it's whoever performs better. I think the Yankees might come, given the cost, they might come from the attitude of Reynolds doesn't make us like securely better than the Astros. So we could make the Reynolds deal, still go into an Astros series and lose base. That could be experience, like those little margins could beat us. And then we're selling our future down the few years. So I don't know. It depends on how they value the prospects. This is a very passive way for this year of looking at it. But do they think that in 2 years, keeping those prospects, are they like significantly better than the Astros and their competition with those prospects, as opposed to getting Reynolds now if he doesn't make them significantly better? If it's just marginally, I don't know if they're willing to take that risk.
That's the $1 million question right now. And I mean, this also does segue into a little note how they brought in 2 executives into the front office that are very well established in the MLB at this point. And that is Brian Sabian and then Omar Minaya as of today. Those are 2 guys that have been GMs in the past. Minaya with the Mets and then Sabian with the Giants. And both of them are well renowned when it comes to recruiting and to scouting, which is huge. I mean, I think this is a thing that both of these guys have very comfortable relationships with Brian Cashman at this point. So it's not like they are completely putting pressure on his job security. He already knows that he's going to be with the Yankees for the next 4 years. This is a guy that, or 2 guys that he's comfortable confiding in when it comes to actually talking about, hey, do you think this is the right way to develop this player? Do you think he can develop into something bigger for us? And I think that those are going to be put to the test immediately, because we have both Spencer Jones, who in my opinion, Spencer Jones is the future like prospect that's going to come up the quickest in terms of the outfielders. And why News talked about him a lot. I've been high on him for a minute. We've talked about our prospect episode. He was my favorite pick from the jump. He has so much of the ceiling already at this point offensively. He tore it up in both low A and high A and rookie ball last season. I think that he is going to skyrocket through this system, and we could potentially see him by next year. And he's, just straight out of college. Like, this is a dude that's ready to go. So I think the Yankees have a difficult decision whether it comes to. I think he is safe with his ability to grow through the Yankee system. It's Jason Dominguez, on the other hand, that I think they're kind of pondering right now. Is it worth it to trade him away for a big-time win-now player? And the thing is, you sign Rodon to this huge contract. You sign Judge to this huge contract. They are in a win-now mode at this very moment. The clock has started ticking. So do they want to wait another year into those contracts? Cole's already starting to age. I mean, he's not looking like he's aging necessarily, but he's going to be, 32, 33 next season?
Oh, yeah. And now's the time it seems like you can jump on the Jason Dominguez hype train because he's close and he's proven statistically and just by his overall performance, even non-performance based statistics, but more like projected batted ball data and stuff. He's shown that he can be consistent. And okay, we have this hype, we have this prospect potential that's been talked about for forever. That one season of value, Jason Dominguez is probably at a high right now in terms of solidified value. And who knows, he could go out and have a Vladdy Jr. AAA season that we saw a few years ago, and then he would go higher. But then do you bet on his ceiling right now, given all of his hype? My thing with Sabian, that move, as well as Omar Minaya coming in. So Sabian spent the last 30 years with the Giants organization, and he won a bunch of World Series with them. I think he was also an assistant GM. Was he? I don't know
What?
what his different role. Oh, executive vice president of the Giants, a bunch of different stuff. But so
Yeah.
his claim to fame with the Yankees, he was with the org in his early 30s. He was in the scouting department from 86 to 90, and then he was the vice president of player development in 90 to 92. And you might know those seasons for when Steinbrenner was suspended for a bit from baseball,
Mhm.
and the Yankees and Gene Michael focused on player development. Some of those players, the 92 draft, I believe, was Derek Jeter. You're looking at Bernie Williams, Andy Pettitte, Mariano Rivera would have been a pickup internationally around them and in the development system there. So we could be looking at that move to be, how do we get our young talents to be contributors on World Series teams in 2 to 3 years, which is basically what he was doing, rebuilding that horrid late 80s Yankees team into the team of the decade of the 90s and in the latter half of the 90s. So that's where I could see them being conservative. Who knows what his role is going to be, because he also knew how to pull the big trigger trades with the Giants in 2010, 12, and 14. So obviously he's been around the block, had a balanced approach. And I think Manaya also is a guy who's a player development focus. I know he got a lot of flack when he was the general manager of the Mets. I think his management was poor. He had the infamous decision to fire Willie Randolph in the middle of a road trip in California. So he got a lot of pushback from the Mets there, but he was pretty successful with the Mets when you look at the scope of what the Mets were looking to do. They built a pretty top talented team, notoriously underperformed in the playoffs for a few years, but they had Beltran, Vladuca, Reyes, Wright, Delgado. That was a really good team. So I could see their philosophy being more prospect focused, which is why I kind of hesitate on the Reynolds deal, though I would like it to happen. At this point, I would bet against it.
Yeah. I mean, I think that he, by assessing the prospect capital that they have right now and by trying to establish that new core four, core five, whatever it may be, they're also looking and seeing, is it worth trading away certain pieces to kind of cut that down a little bit? If they can trim fat, then they're going to do that. And I think that still is intertwined in how they could potentially move payroll as well. What kind of salary dumps can they do to bring in even more prospects? So, like, there are different ways to go about it. Also, looking at Gleyber Torres, now that DJ LeMahieu is apparently healthy, like, we'll see if that holds up. We'll see if Gleyber is still on the team come opening day. But if DJ is, nice and healthy, is he going to be playing second base? Is he going to be playing third base? Because if he is, then where's Gleyber going to fit? You know, and I think that's going to leave Gleyber in a place where his value is probably at the highest it's been in 2.5 years, 2 years, because of the two down seasons that he had between 2021 and 2020. This might be a good time to trade him, especially when his value is about $10 million is what he's getting paid this year. So if you can get prospects back for him, that could be a way to replenish a farm if you are going to make that kind of move for Reynolds. But I really have this gut feeling that they aren't done adding to the roster as it is, because they are building this minor league depth. And we could easily say that, one of these guys that they brought in recently, Billy McKinney, who was the guy? I forgot which other we're going to talk about Rafael,
Rafael
but
Ortega.
yeah, and then they brought in one more dude, I think, even before him. So it's 3 left fielders in about 5 or 6 days, I think, is the total that they brought in recently. And I'm just not convinced that they're fully banking on one of those guys to be the left fielder starting opening day. However, like, it is very possible that they try to have a reclamation project a lot like a Gio Urshela. So that is definitely in the scope. Like, I'm not going to rule that out completely, but I still think that they're trying to bolster the overall depth in AAA so that way they can make a trade for, a salary dump or something like that to clear space for a potential Reynolds trade. That's just where my mind's going.
Yeah. And I'll transition into Rafael Ortega, but first,
Yep,
I think you were referencing Willie Calhoun
that's the one.
as that
Willie.
third signing.
Yep.
Yeah. So what's interesting by CBS Sports, Billy McKinney is listed as a right fielder. I just looked at a transaction list. Willie Calhoun is listed as a DH, so I don't see him as a long-term defensive option, but could be an interesting camp invite. And let's see what he does in the spring. And Rafael Ortega is listed as a center fielder. So I'll talk about why I like the Rafael Ortega move, even if he doesn't make the big leagues. Because right now, Hicks is guaranteed a major league roster spot. He would have to accept an assignment if we were to send him down, which, given some of his interviews in the media and his pride, I don't know if he would do that. I think he would rather accept a trade, but then the trade gets tricky because they'd have to take on a $10 million salary. And looking at Rafael Ortega's numbers relative to Hicks's numbers, I think Ortega is a better piece. Ortega's 31 years old. He has been up and down with the minors for the past 14 years. He has one of those really long baseball reference pages because if you don't have a certain amount of major league service time, it gives all of your minor league details. But he has about 30 lines of minor league details because he bounced up and down the system in the Rockies, with the Cubs. But the last 2 years with Chicago, some pretty good numbers. He had an 823 OPS in 2021 overall and a 688 OPS in 2022. He doesn't play against lefties. He mashes righties. And actually, if you go to Baseball Savant and you look at his spray chart, and we kind of did this with Rizzo because there were some other guys doing it around baseball. I know that John Boy had done it early on in the season about Rizzo homers
Yeah.
from Wrigley to Yankee Stadium. Doing the same thing on Rafael Ortega. He had 7 home runs 7 outs, fly ball outs to right field that would be projected home runs at Yankee Stadium. Given that he can be a center field option as well, I think it puts pressure on Hicks at the very least to not suck. Like it's an insurance option. And it's a very real possibility if we're gonna go with nobody and run out that platoon. I don't want Hicks feeling comfortable. And I don't want Oswaldo Cabrera being that option out there. So I don't know if we can defer Hicks or maybe we package a trade with Hicks and somebody else. They take on a lot of money. I think he can be productive. He can be a good pinch hit bat if he makes the team. A lefty coming in against the righty, somebody if you want to fly ball. Because I think right now, looking at our bench, we don't have confident late game power pinch hit options. Because even Hicks coming off the bench has proven to be a really shitty pinch hitter.
Yeah.
And just not a great hitter in general. So I like Ortega that way. And if he doesn't make the team, he doesn't make the team. Him being in the minors, being an option there, can just put a little pressure and provide some security at a really low cost for the Yankees, which I like. And if they get a big guy, I mean, he accepted a minor league deal. It's a conditional major league deal. He'll get paid major league money if he gets called up. But he's willing to play in the minors, which is huge for control and flexibility.
That's why I'm not concerned about any of these moves, just because all 3 of those outfielders / DHs that they brought in are on minor league deals. So it's going to be a prorated fee at the end of the day, depending on how many games they played throughout the season. That's not concerning to me whatsoever. So that's something that, like, if Yankees fans want to be reassured that, like, this isn't like the plan that they're going with to start the season, like, rest assured they don't have to stick with any of these guys. They're all just guaranteed pretty much a spring training invite, and that's all that means right now. And if anything, they'll be released or go to AAA if they don't make the major league roster. But I do think Ortega is a more compelling option than Hicks at this point. And frankly, I don't trust Cabrera out there. That's the one position I didn't trust him at the entire season. He looked great in right field. Like, we saw it with our own eyes. Like, he looks very natural out there. Obviously, when he plays shortstop, it's just about seamless. Same thing with third, same thing with second. Left field is the one that I think it's going to take several years for him to truly master if he wants to play out there. And there's no reason to pigeonhole him to that position right now. he's better as that versatile, dynamic bounce around, Swiss Army knife, if you want to call him that. I think that if you try to just completely shoehorn him into left field only, his production is going to go down at the plate. He's going to have issues tracking balls out there. I mean, you do have Bader in center field, so that makes everything a lot easier because he does cover so much ground, but it's not like Cabrera is not an athletic guy. It's just he doesn't know, he's not familiar with that territory yet. And Yankees left field is spacious. That's a lot of room to work with. So I would prefer someone who could actually hold their own out there. And Ortega, he does have center field experience, so I think if you are going to bring anyone in there to do that, that's currently technically on the roster right now, he's the guy.
Yeah, and I want to highlight because a lot of people talked about Oswaldo being a Swiss Army knife, which he was, and he was really valuable that way. But being confused or minimizing the difficulty of why left field was an issue for him. And for all of you that play video games and whatnot, and let's say FIFA or NBA or MLB, imagine playing at a certain camera angle for 10, 15 years of your life and specializing in that, and then changing your camera settings one day. Like you'd be thrown off by it. Now imagine there's 50,000 people watching you play your video game and there's a glare over your computer screen or you can't see something, which is Yankee Stadium left field during the day. And you're also used to playing a position about 90 feet to 150 feet closer. He's used to playing third base and shortstop and going out to left field. Like it has to be a jarring experience. And then let alone he has to be a professional athlete defensively out there. He has to know the shifts. He has to read the ball off the bat, which I'm a center fielder by trade. I find the corner outfields more difficult to read off the bat because it's less true. There's more spin you have to account for that you don't always see coming out of the pitcher's hand. So yeah, I think it would be unfair to us, Waldo, and unoptimal for us to get value out of him to have him be the day in, day out left fielder. So yeah. What do you think of Max Kepler as an option?
Honestly, if we're going to out on Reynolds and we're going the trade route, I think he might be the second best option. And it's because I don't know how many more years of control he has, maybe 2 or 1. So it's not like he's got crazy team control right now. So you're not fully locked down with him and he doesn't have a crazy salary. So it's not like you're taking on a bunch of dollars. He is a high contact lefty who's had some bad luck with the shift. I think there's if anyone's going to benefit from the shift being killed, it's him. He has been in Minnesota for his entire career now. He had that great 2019 season with the juice ball era. I think that he is in need of a change of scenery. His injury history does kind of concern me a little bit, but the prospect package that you're going to have to give up for him is not nearly as dire as what we would have to give up for a Reynolds. So I think that they have him in the back pocket in case the Reynolds deal just is an absolutely like hard stop. I think this is a easy hard pivot for them to make. So if we see Reynolds either go somewhere else or the Pirates extend him or say that he's locked in for the rest of the season, whatever it may be, I think that they're going to make that quick little pivot over to Kepler just because it makes a lot of sense for the fit. And we've been complaining about, the Yankees striking out in the playoffs and not having enough lefties and having lefties that strike out too much. It's just like you can never find that right balance. I think that Kepler has enough upside where you can see like he's not going to blow us away with like all-star crazy, like, top 10 MVP numbers, but he's going to be a serviceable outfielder who knows what he's doing. So I don't hate it. I wish I could say I do, but like they're achieving exactly what Yankees fans said that we have a need for. So if that's what you can get, that's what you can get. And it's better than Hicks.
Yeah. Do you think we can convince the Twins to take back IKF and Donaldson? Or maybe even Hicks? I don't know. Just former Twins, shove them in there. IKF never played for them, but
I mean, like, hey, he had a 24-hour tenure with them, something like that.
a few days.
If they can manage to convince the Twins GM to take on all 3 of them, one of 2 things is going to happen. Either Cashman's going to go into the Hall of Fame right then and there, or or the Twins are going to end up with Carlos Correa again. I don't know. If you can get one of those guys offloaded, if you can get Hicks offloaded and then IKF, that's a huge win because that's what $16 million this year, something along those lines. I think IKF made $6 million in arbitration or pre-arbitrate, whatever, and then Donald or Hicks is 10
They came
million.
to a deal to avoid ARB. But
Yeah, so 16 total. That's great. That clears off a lot of space. If they want to add to the bullpen, they can pick up an Andrew Chafin or someone like that, and then you're still adding a plus. It's a net positive because you're subtracting like two guys that are like honestly at this point I don't think IKF fully has a spot on the team, especially if Glaber and TJ are still on the team together. It just there's a big surplus of infielders, and that's the same with the prospect system at this point too. So they need to make some moves in order to make room for these prospects to come up. A lot of these guys have similar clocks at this point. So like their times of arrivals are going to be dictated based on how much roster movement is made in like within the next year or so. So I think the best way to do that is honestly finding a team like the Twins. Like, hey, this guy Kepler still clearly needs a change of scenery. We have two guys for you that definitely need a change of scenery. Hicks was in your system already to start his career. This might be a good time for a reunion. I think that could work out really well. And if you take on Donaldson, like then that's insane. I don't know how that's pulled off. Mountains would be moved.
We had the crowdsource like everyone to buy tickets and merch for whatever team would take on the Donaldson contract.
I will buy a Donaldson Twins movie.
He was good for them too. Like,
yeah, like
I wasn't excited about Donaldson coming over. 8 something, I forget.
830. I think that was a down year for him.
Yeah, exactly. I wasn't excited about him coming over on those numbers. And you look at like he had like about a 150 drop in OPS, and like it's stunning. Yeah,
like
exactly.
I mean, I can blame them for like the stupidity of like giving away Urshela for a player that's of a similar caliber, but at the same time, it's like Donaldson was a former MVP and all this stuff, and like his defense was superb. So they just need to figure out what the fuck is going on with his swing.
I don't knock the acquisition, but like the Yankees prove time and time again, once they're wrong, they just ride it out for the year. Like baseball is the one sport where there's a big enough sample for the first like half of the year that you can understand what's happening. And this wasn't a shock come September, October, how they were performing. Like I understand the mindset they were in for the acquisition. I think it was naive to think of IKF as a long-term solution, though I guess they never saw him as one. I think they are relying on the prospects coming up, so a stopgap that's serviceable. He was probably worse than they thought he would be ultimately, and they convinced themselves that by different metrics that say different things for shortstops because range is just hard to measure, and whether a player should or shouldn't make a play depending on different batted ball data and shifts that are so variable, and there's literally inches of difference between intended and actual positioning. I'm rambling now on defensive stats, but
we could go on about that forever. Yeah.
Basically it's the fact that they double down.
Shortstop is one of those positions you can like actually go by eye test a little bit, like if you can see that a player is moving smoothly out there and making good routes to the ball, it's the same as like center field. But if you can see that and you can tell that they're moving right and have good lateral steps and have a good arm across the diamond, like those are things that you don't necessarily need all the advanced numbers to tell you. So
2 things. One, I want to break down for the people some stats to look at. So what are the important new age stats? I'm actually wearing, incidentally, my high school baseball jersey because it was the one shirt I had after work that was in that closet there that I can put on and be baseball related. But on my high school baseball team, our team manager, his name Mike Labella. Shout out to Mike Labella. We used to call him the man with the stats. And he was a big stats nerd. He like OG Moneyball guy. I forget the name of Keith Law's book, but he knew all of the advanced statistics and stuff, and he would tell us what they were. So, and he's gone into coaching and baseball analytics now. He's on that path. So he does like travel team management and analytics. And he's actually going to your alma mater, I think, for his master's in data analytics. He's going to Ole
Oh, for
Miss.
Ole Miss. That's awesome. That's
Yeah.
huge.
So I want to maybe one day we'll get Labella on the pod to talk us through what those stats mean, and when we talk about them and when we talk about analytics as this boogeyman term, what are the teams looking at, what's actually useful position to position, and maybe it'll help us all be a bit more informed as fans. My second anecdote, I saw Max Kepler have a 3 home run game. I'll give you $20 if you can guess what city I saw.
Oh man. AL or NL?
AL.
Is that too? Okay. Boston.
Nope. Cleveland.
Ah,
I
yeah, I would
saw
not get
him,
that.
Max Kepler, hit 3 home runs in Andrew Miller's Cleveland Indians debut, August,
Oh,
I
really?
think it was 1st or 3rd of 2016. I was in Cleveland for a baseball tournament, and I went to a game. He had 3 homers. It was weird. I had no idea who this guy was.
Was one of them against Miller?
One of them was against Miller.
Oh, that's like good
I
Miller
think.
too.
Wait, or yeah, or did Joe Mauer go deep on him? Yeah, that was the year that the Indians went to the World Series. Like they were a good team.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and Kepler just had like 7 or 8 RBI and 3 homers out of nowhere. And I'm like, who? I was looking him up, and like he's from Germany. No one comes from Germany.
Yeah, I actually met Luke Farrell. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he's a relief pitcher. I met him at Ottavino's
Nope.
lab, and he mentioned that Kepler was like training out there, and I think his girlfriend lives out there still, or something along those lines, and he's a really cool guy. So I wouldn't mind having him in the Bronx. Just saying, a little German connection, you know.
Take it. Would love Max Kepler. Yeah.
Big Kepler guy.
You going to Germany anytime on your trip? Or you bypass Germany altogether?
Completely bypassed it somehow. Like the closest I got was the Netherlands, and like just completely whiffed it. That would have been a little bit further east, I think, for then what was out of reach for what we were doing for this trip. I have an agency. I'm signed in Munich, so I definitely need to make my way out there.
If you go to Munich, let me know. Yeah.
Let's plan
I
a
want to
trip.
go to the Oktoberfest. Yeah.
Yeah.
I also want to see a Bayern Munich game. Bucket list for soccer. That's my thing. My girlfriend and I make a deal every
Oh.
new city we go to that it
Mm.
basically we go to like baseball stadiums or soccer stadiums, wherever we're going to. Just and we appease one another. So she has a goal, I have a goal. We both do something for us, and then we do the rest together.
That's great. I actually, so my sister's boyfriend's here, and his old roommate is from Munich, and he came and met us in Barcelona for a second, and he
Nice.
apparently played American football in Germany. Like
In
apparently it's
Germany?
huge there. Yeah, in
Yeah.
Munich.
Yeah,
Like
because the
that was his
NFL had the
sport.
league there for a while.
And like he
Wow.
played it in high school and college, and like he loved it. So like that's I didn't realize how big it was, but we've got something in common there.
I guess it's like you playing rugby in college.
Yeah,
Like
that's
not
true.
really an American
Then
thing.
again, like
Yeah.
but like Xavier, like in particular, like in going back to high school stuff, like Xavier is such a huge rugby school that like
Oh
I guess
yeah.
they really kind of implanted it in our brain that it's like the fastest growing sport in the US. So I'm surprised that it kind of tapered down a little bit of late. But yeah, no, it's one of those sneaky universal sports, you know.
Yeah. I think I went to a Xavier rugby game once
Who hasn't, honestly?
in high school. They were so big.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they're like the best team locally. Shout out Xavier. Wow, so many shout outs in the pod today.
We're just naming all the Catholic
Xavier
schools.
rugby, Malloy
Yeah.
baseball.
Let's cover what? Iona now. Fordham.
Shout out Andrew Velasquez.
Good.
All right, I think that's everything we had to cover today. Oh, we have one more on the docket. Rafael Devers signed the extension. The Red Sox finally decided to sign somebody, which, claps to the Red Sox. RIP, Mookie Betts, JD Martinez, Andrew Benintendi, and Xander Bogaerts. But they got Devers, who is the one I'm the most afraid of, aside from Mookie, but at least they got somebody.
He's the second best one out of that bunch, but the youngest one. Yeah, for sure. It's
Yeah.
it completely changes the scope of their offseason though. Now, because like if they make the one thing that does scare me about the whole Reynolds situation is what if the Red Sox try to trade for him? You know, like that's my one biggest fear is one of these other AL East
They
teams goes
can't.
after him. Like
Why? They
it
could.
doesn't make too much sense, but they've been doing things that haven't made a lot of sense this offseason. You know, like they're in this very weird
Yeah.
non-committal but committal situation where like they're trying to, prove that they're in it to win it, but at the same time, they're letting guys like Xander walk. So it's really hard to tell. I know that they're in conversations with the Marlins right now about Pablo Lopez or like one of the pitchers over there, maybe a Trevor Rogers for Casas, I think is their first base prospect who had kind of
Tristan
climbed up
Casas,
the
yeah.
ranking. Yeah, finally made it to the majors last season. So like they're definitely looking
And
to
they still
make
have
one more
Dahlbeck
trade. I
too.
think, yeah, I think they need to make a pitching move because that's where they're lacking the most right now. Like Sale needs to prove that he's healthy, and then you've got Kluber, who like if Kluber's your number two or number three, you're kind of in trouble. If we're being real, so they're definitely going to have to bring in another arm, and I think that the trade route makes the most sense for them. But I would be very fucking concerned if Brian Reynolds ends up in the AL East with like either them or the Blue Jays. Well, Blue Jays don't make sense anymore, but like you know what I mean. Like if one of these teams comes out of the woodwork, like even the Orioles haven't done a lot this offseason, even though they said they were going to do a lot. So and
That
they're
would
in
be
a
a
position where
sneak great move for the Orioles.
they have the farm to do it too. Like they have a really good
They
farm
do.
system, and they have two guys that just came up that are outstanding baseball players. So if you bring in a Brown Reynolds to that fold, like that is scary. And that's one of the reasons why I do think the Yankees still like they're aiming high for that, final big piece. But if they have to settle for a Kepler, then so be it. If you can get Reynolds and lock him up in order to prevent the Red Sox or the Orioles or any other AL East or AL rival from getting him, then I think that's worth it because he will make any other lineup better at the end of the day. He's that good of a hitter.
All right, last things closing it up. I have two more questions.
Yeah.
Who is your starting left fielder on opening day? Who do you think? Not who do you wish, who do you think it'll be?
Max Kepler or Rafael Ortega.
What's what's your percentage on that?
This is tough, man, because I'm still like I think like there's very much like I'm in that optimistic train still. I know it's cautiously
Hmm.
optimistic, but I still think that there's like a 55% chance it's Reynolds and a 45% chance that it's Kepler. I don't know.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think that Hicks is like plan Z.
My answer is Oswaldo Cabrera, but I'm only like 30%
Oh,
sure.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
that's the thing is like everything's a shot in the dark right now because they're so tight-lipped about any type of moves they make. That's one of the other reasons I'm still like not losing my faith
yes.
because the Donaldson move, despite being so poorly, aged, it did come out of absolutely nowhere. The same thing with the Stanton trade. So if Cashman brought in these new advisors to, kind of look at flexibility and things like that to make something happen, then I think that they do have something greater planned. And it might take a minute, which sucks because like it's hard to be patient, especially when you're overseas. That's not great. But I would really like to see a move at like a reasonable hour. Um, but I'm not convinced that they're done trying to go for that big fish, especially if you're trying to appease Aaron Judge, who said he wanted more moves to be made when he signed that big deal this offseason. That's like one of the biggest compelling factors for me. And NYY News, real quick, they brought up a really good note that Cashman has a bit of an ego, and so far this season, the two big free agents that the Yankees brought in, Judge and Rodon, they credited Hal for both of those moves. They were like, yeah, he closed the deal on this. This was him. Like he locked us in and he sold us the world essentially, and we bought it. Cashman wasn't really mentioned in that. So the fact that he didn't get the credit for those moves and he wasn't even, I think he just got hired at that point. I think that he is yet to like actually set his mark on this offseason. And when he does that, then I'll say, okay, case shut. This is what the left field outlook is going to be. This is what the entire roster is going to look like. But he's yet to do that. So I think he's kind of waiting in the weeds right now.
And it makes sense too, because when you're looking at the contracts given out to Judge and Rodon, those are long-term, big money business deals that typically an owner, a CEO, I forget Hal's official title, executive. Randy Levine's president, but Hal is like executive something that basically makes him the operational owner of the ownership group. That's always an owner CEO decision on a business level. But Cashman, and this is where GMs get their money and what they get paid, is the little moves in between. And like to your point, Cashman, that's where Hal says, you have this budget, you have this amount of money, fill up our team within there. And that's Hal is making those decisions on committing $360 million, $200 million respectively to Judge and Rodon. I overshot Rodon, whatever. But on the 20, on the 5 to 50, even to $100 million range, that's Cashman's to work with within the budget. So we'll see what he can do.
Yeah, I still don't think they're actually over the 293 threshold too at this point. So they could
Correct.
make a few more trades just to clear a little bit more salary to make sure they're comfortably under that while still improving the team, because Reynolds isn't going to cost that much for this year, or like whichever guy they trade for. There's ways to make that work so that they're not spending more than 285, and they're still improving what the roster has to offer. But go ahead.
Who finishes last in the AL East?
Red Sox.
Yep. Who finishes second?
I think the Yankees lock up first. Still, that pitching rotation is insane. Here's my thing with second is Tampa always has a chance to get it done because they're just so analytically driven and they find a way to just weasel into that wild card position. But if the Blue Jays and Jose Barrios, if he gets it together and pitches like a 2 or a 3.
Oh yeah, if he's not the worst pitcher in baseball, that would be pretty nice for them.
Yes. And like he has the ceiling to be a top 10 Cy Young winner or like Cy Young finalist. Like he has that ceiling.
Yeah,
but
he's done it.
If he's terrible again, then where are you gonna go? Probably third place. So I think that it's likely the Blue Jays have a higher ceiling than the Rays. So I would say Blue Jays 2. And then it gets dicey because the Orioles, like, if they do make another move, if they end up trading for Reynolds, they could easily sneak in for the second wild card. But I'd have to say I'm at 4 right now. I think that it's probably, Tampa 3, Baltimore 4, and then Red Sox 5.
Yeah, I think the Orioles are like an 84, 85 win team right now that could finish in 4th. But they're a 90 to 92 win team if they can get another big bat, another big piece, or even if they get a big pitcher like John Means coming back. So they're going to be scary. We're not going to have any divisional games this year, and I'm kind of thankful for the balanced schedule more, because the worst team in our division is the Red Sox, which is never a given. Like you go into Fenway, Yankees, Red Sox, just the energy is too high to ever think we have to win 15 out of 19 games against this last place team, which has been the Orioles for the past few years. So I think it's going to be a grind. I think it's going to be tough for the Yankees to get 100 wins, even with this really good team. That's all I got.
Yeah, I think we kind of covered everything that we can think of. I'm sure there's more that will hopefully pop up in the next week or two. And once I'm back in New York, we should get back to more of a regular schedule.
And we'll cover all the news coming. We're going to try and come up with some fun episodes for you. I kind of previewed. Maybe we have an episode on stats. We're going to bring in some of our friends, maybe to give some insight into some other teams around baseball and who our competitors are looking at. But for now, Jake, enjoy the rest of your trip in the United Kingdom, in London. And I'll talk to you guys soon.